A few years ago, Mariela and I boarded a plane in San Juan. Less than 30 minutes later, we landed in another country. A different flag, a different government, a different passport, different nation. But the strange thing was, it didn't feel foreign. The streets felt familiar. I mean, everything felt familiar. The churches, the food, the history, the people. And the deeper I dug into the history of Santo Domingo, the more I realized something. If you really want to understand Puerto Rico, you may first need to understand Santo Domingo. Because for centuries, our story was their story. And what started as a simple research trip looking for clues about the founder of my hometown of Utuado turned into one of the most fascinating journeys I've ever taken. Today, we're going to walk through the oldest European city in the Americas. We're going to explore centuries of history. We're going to talk rum, food, churches, archives, governors, and family history, among other things. And somewhere in all that, we're going to discover why Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic remain connected more than 500 years later. And yes, we're going to do it with the traditional Dominican cocktail. One that is tasty, and of course, we're gonna make it later in the episode. Hola everybody, welcome back to another episode of Chronicles and Cocktails. I'm Josué, the spirited historian. And yes, today we're heading across the Mona Passage, just a few miles, to one of my favorite cities in the world, actually, Santo Domingo. Now, before we start, if you're new here to the channel, Chronicles and Cocktails is where history, culture, travel, food, cocktails, and heritage come together. So grab a cocktail or a coffee if you want, and let's travel back in time. But before we continue, I want you to check out last week's episode on the west side of Puerto Rico, one of my favorite places on the island. We discovered towns like Isabela, Aguadilla, Rincón, Aguada, Mayagüez, Cabo Rojo, Guánica, Sabana Grande, and the Big Daddy, San Germán. So, take a ride with me and go see the West. Today, let's go to Santo Domingo. When most people think about Caribbean destinations, they think beaches, resorts, cruise ships, palm trees. But Santo Domingo is something entirely different. This is one of the most important cities in the history of the Americas. Long before there was a New York, long before there was a Boston, and long before there was a New Orleans, there was a Santo Domingo. And if you're from Puerto Rico, that matters. Because before Puerto Rico became Puerto Rico, Santo Domingo was already shaping the Caribbean. For centuries, many legal, religious, and governmental matters affecting Puerto Rico were tied to Santo Domingo. Ships traveled between both islands constantly. Families moved back and forth. Priests moved back and forth. And even military officers moved from one island to the other. Governors were moved back and forth. Ideas were also moving. The Mana Passage was not a barrier. It was a highway. And that's important to remember throughout this entire episode, because the relationship between Puerto Rico and Santo Domingo didn't begin recently. It began more than 500 years ago.
Voy a cantar esta canción con mucho cariño de mi corazón a la República Dominicana, la casa del merengue y la casa de la bachata. Voy a cantar esta canción con mucho cariño de mi corazón a la República Dominicana, la casa del merengue y la casa de la bachata. La casa del merengue, la y la casa de la bachata. Música, 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 te traigo música.
We arrived on a Sunday afternoon. The weather was beautiful, the city was alive, and we checked into the Hotel Nicolás de Obando Hotel. Now, that's not just a fancy hotel name. Nicolás de Obando was one of the most important figures in the early Spanish Caribbean. When he arrived in Santo Domingo in 1502, he reorganized and rebuilt much of the city following a devastating hurricane. Many historians consider his administration instrumental in creating what would become the model for Spanish colonial cities throughout the Americas. In other words, our trip had barely started, and history was already everywhere. We unpacked, walked outside, and immediately found ourselves standing on one of the most historic streets in the Americas. Calle Las Damas, the Street of the Ladies. Many historians consider it the oldest paved street in the Americas. Think about that. 500 years of footsteps, conquistadors, governors, priests, merchants, soldiers, noblewomen, travelers, and now 2 Puerto Ricans looking for old records. The street takes its name from María de Toledo and the noblewoman who accompanied her through the city. And as we walked those same stones, it felt less like visiting a foreign country and more like walking through the first chapter of Caribbean history. Not far away stands Fortaleza Ozama. Massive, beautiful, and intimidating. This fortress has stood guard over Santo Domingo for centuries. Standing there looking toward the river, you quickly realize something. The Caribbean wasn't always about tourism. It was about power, trade, defense, empire. The water separating Puerto Rico and Santo Domingo connected 2 of the most important strategic locations in the Spanish Caribbean. These weren't isolated islands. They were neighbors, partners, and yes, sometimes rivals, but always connected. One of my favorite places was Plaza de España. Wide open, beautiful, historic, and overlooking it stands the Alcázar de Colón. Unfortunately, it was under renovation during our visit, so we couldn't go inside. But even from the outside, it's impressive. This was the home of Diego Colón, the son of Cristóbal Colón. And when you stand there, you realize something. This wasn't a frontier town. This was one of the great cities of the early Spanish Empire.
Música, 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 te traigo música, música, música.
Now, you all know me. If there's an old church, I'm going. And this one did not disappoint. The Cathedral of Santa María la Menor, the oldest cathedral in the Americas. Walking through those doors felt special, not because of the architecture alone, but because of what it represents. Centuries of faith, centuries of history, of people who came before us. And for those of us from Puerto Rico, you begin seeing familiar patterns. You begin understanding where many of our institutions came from. You begin understanding that Puerto Rico and Santo Domingo grew up together.
Gracias.
But here's the thing. I wasn't in Santo Domingo just to sightsee. I was there because of a man who died centuries ago. A man connected to the founding of my hometown of Utuado. A man named Sebastián de Morfi. And that search would become one of the most rewarding parts of this trip. For years, I've been researching the history of Utuado, and one name keeps appearing, Sebastián de Morfi, the man generally recognized as the founder of the settlement that would become Utuado. As I dug deeper into the story, I discovered something fascinating. The Morfi story doesn't stop in Puerto Rico. The name appears throughout Spanish Caribbean history. Connections emerge between Puerto Rico, Santo Domingo, Spain, colonial administration, military service, church records, government records, and eventually, my search brought me here, to Santo Domingo. Because sometimes local history isn't local at all. Sometimes a story that begins in a small mountain town in Puerto Rico becomes a Caribbean story. One of the highlights of the entire trip was visiting the historical archive of the Archdiocese. For a history nerd, this place is heaven. Rows of records, ancient documents, baptism, marriages, deaths. Generations of history waiting quietly on the shelves. This is where history stops being abstract. This is where history becomes personal. And this is where we met someone who would become incredibly important to my research. El Padre José Luis Sáez. Father José Luis Sáez was a priest, a historian, an archivist, a scholar, a teacher, and one of the kindest people we met during our trip. He welcomed us, guided us, looked through records, helped answer questions, shared knowledge, and even after we returned home, he continued helping us. We exchanged messages, discussed research, and he always made time to help. Sadly, Father José Luis Sáez passed away on May 6, 2026, just a little bit over a month from recording this episode. And I wanted to take a moment during this episode to thank him, because every historical discovery depends on people willing to preserve knowledge, people willing to help others, people willing to open doors. Y el Padre José Luis Sáez was one of those people. And this episode is dedicated to his memory. Thank you, Padre. You helped more than you probably ever knew. The rest of the trip was equally incredible. We visited the Museo de las Casas Reales, the Panteón Nacional, el Monumento a Cristóbal Colón en la Plaza de Colón, el Palacio Consistorial, Parque de la Independencia, the ruins of the Monastery of San Francisco, la Casa de la Moneda, and yes, we even rode the choo-choo Colonial train. If you're visiting Santo Domingo for the first time, I actually recommend it. It's a fun way to get oriented and learn the layout of the colonial zone.
En el año 1546, la construcción de la catedral tomó tan solo 18 años. Se inició en 1523 y se concluyó en 1541.
Now, here's something many Puerto Ricans don't realize. When we look at Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic today, we see two separate countries, two separate identities, two separate histories. But for much of that Spanish period, that wasn't really the case. For centuries, Santo Domingo was one of the most important administrative, religious, military, and judicial centers in the Caribbean. Long before airplanes, telephones, or even reliable mail service, officials, priests, merchants, military officers, and settlers moved constantly between Santo Domingo and San Juan. Many matters affecting Puerto Rico passed through Santo Domingo's institution. La Real Audiencia de Santo Domingo was established in the early 1500s, exercised authority over vast territories in the Spanish Caribbean, including Puerto Rico, at different points in its history. The Catholic Church maintained close connections between both islands. Military commanders coordinated defenses against pirates, privateers, and foreign powers. Families established roots on both sides of the Mona Passage. Puerto Rico and Santo Domingo were not neighboring provinces. They were part of the same Caribbean world. And while each island eventually developed its own identity, you still see those shared roots everywhere. In our churches, in the food, in the architecture, in the language, in the surnames, even in the historical records of a small mountain town called Utuado.
All this time, I've been holding on so tight, 'cause all that I do was easy to use. So call my time, but you weren't really mine, just something to do. Thought I never knew. No surprise, but nevertheless, I'm still stuck in self-defense. No surprise, but nevertheless, I get lost when I look in your eyes. I just want to be next to your I get lost when I look in your eyes. Do you even eyes? Learning do you even learning? Leave now, make your escape. You know the fortune favors the brave. So close, just get away. No surprise, but nevertheless, I'm still stuck in self-defense. Do you even I get lost when I look in your eyes. I just want to be next to your I get lost when I look in your eyes. Do you even do you even do you even I get lost when I look in your eyes. I just want to be next to your I get lost when I look in your eyes. Do you even do you even
let me tell you how to prepare this Dominican classic, De Santo Libre. Simple, refreshing, and perfect for a Caribbean afternoon. Fill a tall glass with ice. Add 1.5 to 2 ounces. You know what? Add 2 ounces of Dominican white rum or golden rum, Brugal, which is the one that I use. Squeeze in fresh lime. Top with lemon lime soda. Give it a gentle stir. And that's it. Simple. No shakers, no stirrers. Refreshing, delicious. And what I love about this cocktail is that it also tells a story. The Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico are both rum islands. Both built world classic rum traditions. Both grew sugar cane and exported rum around the world. And both turned rum into part of their cultural identity. Different labels, different distilleries, but the same Caribbean spirit, literally. So when people visit Santo Domingo, they usually see beautiful things. Historic churches, great restaurants, amazing architecture. And that's wonderful. But for me, this trip became something more. It became a reminder that Puerto Rico does not exist in isolation. Our history is connected to Spain, connected to the Caribbean, connected to the Dominican Republic, connected to people who crossed the Mona Passage centuries ago and still do it today, connected to governors, connected to priests, connected to merchants and families and stories. And sometimes, the search for the founder of your hometown leads you somewhere you never expected. When I boarded that plane in San Juan, I thought I was taking a short trip to Santo Domingo. What I didn't realize was that I was also traveling deeper into Puerto Rico's own story, because the history of Santo Domingo is not separate from the history of Puerto Rico. For centuries, they helped shape each other, and even today, you can still feel those connections in the streets, in the churches, in the food, in the rum, in the archives, and in the people. And honestly, that's one of the things I love most about history. The more you learn, the more connected everything becomes. So, what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I will see you next Sunday. For now, be good, have fun, get smart, read a lot, travel, have a cocktail or two, and of course, it's Sunday. Go to church and salud.